If you've ever said yes when you wanted to say no, stayed late when no one saw it, or smiled when it hurt, this story is for you. You're not alone. So tell me, what was your quietest moment of rebellion? I was staring at a bowl of instant noodles, my fourth this week, when the email popped up. Team, please contribute $30 each for the CEO's birthday lunch tomorrow. Let's make him feel appreciated. I blinked, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. And just like that, my $30 food budget for the week was on the line. For a man worth millions. I leaned back in my chair, noodles untouched, cooling in their styrofoam prison. Outside the break room window, the sun hit the parking lot just right, glinting off the hood of a black Bentley I'd seen only once before. That car belonged to the man whose birthday we were expected to fund. It didn't matter that I barely slept anymore, that I worked 2 jobs just to keep rent paid and the lights on, that I hadn't been able to afford fresh fruit in weeks. Someone decided I needed to help pay for a luxury lunch for a man who wouldn't recognize my name if it were tattooed on his birthday cake. The email came from my manager, full of exclamation points and empty cheer. "Let's all show our appreciation for Mr. Landon. He's done so much for the company." I nearly laughed. Mr. Landon had done something for me, all right. 2 months ago, he personally approved a scheduling cut across departments, cutting my hours from 35 to 20 per week. No notice, no conversation, just a vague explanation from my manager. "We're trimming for efficiency. You understand?" Of course I understood. I understood that efficiency meant squeezing more out of fewer people and paying them less for the same results. I understood that, despite working late and picking up shifts no one else wanted, I was disposable. Now, I was being told to hand over $30, half of what I spend on groceries in a week, so this man could eat steak and sip wine with people he barely looked at when walking by. I considered not going, just skipping the lunch. But the manager had already gently reminded us that attendance was encouraged. She'd even mentioned how everyone was giving $30. No pressure, of course. No pressure, just the quiet pressure of not belonging, of not being a team player, of being whispered about for not chipping in. I could already hear it. She couldn't even give $30? It's just lunch. What's her problem? I checked the clock. The party was scheduled for 1 p.m. tomorrow. My shift didn't start until 2:30 p.m., so to show up, I'd have to wake up early after another 4-hour night, miss my midday rest, and put on a polite face for someone who had cut my hours, stalled my raise, and never once said thank you. I closed my inbox. My noodles had gone cold. I ate them anyway. Later that night, while packing orders for my side hustle, I ran numbers in my head. Rent, gas, groceries, tips from last weekend. I had exactly $38 left for the week. 30 would leave me with $8. 8. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, my hands cramping from hours of folding tissue paper, and I made a decision. I wasn't paying for anyone's steak. Not this time. I'd still show up. I'd shake hands, smile politely, play the role. But they wouldn't get $1 from me. Not because I was petty, but because I'd finally realized something. When you have to choose between being polite and being fed, manners can wait. I kept expecting someone to ask me, "Hey, Eliza, did you send in your 30?" But no one did. The silence around it was almost louder than words. I could feel it lingering behind every hallway greeting, every overly cheerful nod from my manager. It was the kind of silence that wasn't neutral. It was loaded, waiting. I considered giving in, just once, just to avoid the discomfort, just to blend in. $10 maybe. That would still leave me 28 for the week, or 20. That would be enough to make it look like I cared, to stay off their radar, to not be that person. But that thought made my stomach turn faster than the cold noodles from the night before. Why was I even entertaining it? I'd been here 3 years, never once called out sick, never missed a deadline. I'd stayed late when others left early, picked up the phone when no one wanted to deal with angry clients, covered for coworkers without asking for anything in return. And somehow, I was still the one being pushed to prove I belonged. All for what? To pitch in for a man who once walked right past me while I was holding the door open for him, didn't even make eye contact. I remember the look on his face. Not unkind, not cruel, just absent, like I wasn't even there. And now I was supposed to celebrate him? There was something deeply twisted in that. The way the office operated like a little ecosystem of pretend loyalty. How birthdays and potlucks were turned into unspoken performance reviews. Are you a team player or are you difficult? The worst part was that I wasn't the only one who couldn't afford it. I knew for a fact that Carla from payroll had 3 kids and was juggling debt collectors between lunch breaks. Marcus from IT recently stopped driving to save on gas. But they'd all given in. Quietly. Carefully. Avoiding the gaze of others while slipping cash into the envelope like it was some kind of moral tax. I wasn't judging them. God, no. I understood the math of fear better than anyone. You stay quiet, and maybe you get to keep your hours. You smile at the right moments, and maybe the next cut doesn't have your name on it. You give $30 you can't spare, because it costs less than being left out. But that wasn't survival, that was surrender. And I wasn't surrendering. That night, I laid out my clothes early. Neat, understated, respectful. I printed a blank card from my old box of supplies and wrote a simple note inside. Wishing you continued health and success. Eliza. No gift, no cash, no apology. It was just enough to be polite without feeding the lie. When I placed the card on my manager's desk the next morning, she smiled too brightly and said, "Thank you, Eliza." I nodded, returned to my cubicle, and opened my email like nothing had happened. But inside, something had shifted. It was subtle, but firm, like a locked jaw or a spine that had finally straightened. I didn't owe these people more than I had, and I would no longer bankrupt myself, financially or emotionally, to keep up the illusion of being part of the team. Tomorrow would be the party. I planned to attend, but this time on my terms. The party started at 1 p.m. My shift didn't begin until 2:30, so technically, I wasn't even required to be there. But I showed up anyway, dressed simple but sharp, my hair pinned back, eyes clear despite the 3 hours of sleep I managed after my night shift. I walked into the break room and felt it immediately. That buzz. The one you feel when a room is full of people pretending. The one that makes the air a little too sweet with forced laughter, a little too thick with the scent of catered food. Thai, I think. Expensive. Definitely not from the cheap takeout place we all ordered from when no one brought lunch. Balloons were taped to the walls. Someone had set up a fruit tray no one touched, and at the center of the table sat a towering cake with glossy white frosting and gold leaf details. One of those boutique designs you'd see on a reality show, not at a workplace where people earned $17 an hour. The CEO, Mr. Landon, stood at the front with his usual polished detachment. Expensive watch, flawless shoes, that casual arrogance that came from never having to worry about things like rent or insulin. He didn't look at me when I entered. He didn't need to. People like him don't notice the people like me, unless we stop serving a purpose. I moved to the far end of the room, near the window. Not hiding, just choosing peace over proximity. A few coworkers smiled at me, tight-lipped and brief, then turned quickly back to their conversations. My manager spotted me and gave a small nod. Her eyes flicked down, just for a second, like she was checking to see if I had a gift bag in hand. I didn't. No one said anything, which honestly was worse than confrontation. The absence of acknowledgement wasn't kindness. It was a quiet warning. We saw you. We're watching. Mr. Landon gave a short, rehearsed thank you speech. He said the word team 4 times in less than 2 minutes. I counted. His voice had that smooth, practiced rhythm I'd heard at town halls and quarterly videos. Every sentence sounded like it had been run through PR and spit-polished for mass consumption. Then came the cake. My manager cut the first slice, handed it to him with a glowing smile, and everyone clapped. Then more slices were passed around, offered on delicate paper plates with gold rims. A plate appeared in front of me. Carla, from payroll, God bless her, slid it over without a word. Our eyes met briefly. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands shook slightly as she handed me a fork. I stared at the cake. I hadn't paid for it. I hadn't contributed. But here it was, a perfectly cut slice. Generous, flawless, balanced layers of buttercream and pride. I didn't move right away. Instead, I just looked at it, long enough for the frosting to begin softening at the edges, long enough to feel the weight of the moment settle into my chest. Then I picked up the fork and ate a single bite. And just like that, something shifted. It wasn't about cake. It was never about cake. It was about permission, about whether I was allowed to exist in this room without paying my way in. And in that moment, I gave myself permission to belong without buying it, to be enough without performing, to take up space, even when that space was uncomfortable. Across the room, I noticed a few glances thrown my way. Nothing direct. Just the kind of subtle, sideways acknowledgement women like me learn to clock early. I didn't flinch, didn't shrink. I finished the slice slowly, deliberately. Someone near the table made a joke about the cake being worth every penny, and a few people laughed harder than they needed to. I kept my face calm, my spine straight. Not cold, not angry, just present. A few minutes later, people began dispersing. Some returned to their desks. Others lingered, pretending to clean or check emails. I stood, threw away the empty plate, and walked out of the room like I hadn't just committed silent rebellion. But I had. Not the kind that makes headlines, the kind that whispers, the kind that echoes later when someone else starts to question why they always feel like they're buying their way into a system that's already stacked against them. As I walked back to my cubicle, I passed by Carla again. She didn't speak, but this time she smiled. Just a little. And that little smile felt like thunder. Monday morning came like it always did. Too early, too gray, too quiet. The party was already old news. Leftover fruit sat untouched in the kitchen, its once bright strawberries now soft and leaking sugar. The gold-rimmed plates were gone. So was the performance. I returned to my desk like nothing had happened, but everything had. I wasn't imagining it, the subtle change in the air. A beat slower in the way people passed each other in the hallway. A stiffness in how small talk landed, as if everyone had just realized they were participating in something hollow. Or maybe it was just me. Maybe I was the one seeing it now, with new eyes. No one confronted me about not paying. No one thanked me for being there either. And that was fine. I hadn't shown up for approval. I'd shown up for myself. But I noticed something. Carla was different. She didn't sit with the same slouch she always had. Her shoulders were just a little straighter. She brought lunch from home, real food, not the vending machine crackers she used to nibble through meetings. She laughed once, too, out loud. It startled me. Marcus from IT passed me in the hall, gave me a short nod. We'd never really spoken beyond technical questions, but the nod held something quiet and unmistakable, like solidarity. It wasn't a revolution. Not yet. But something was cracking under the surface. At 4 p.m., my manager stopped by my desk. Clipboard in hand, smile tight. "Eliza," she said, "I just wanted to say thank you for showing up Friday. Mr. Landon noticed." I looked up slowly. "Noticed what?" "That you were there," she said quickly, eyes darting down to her checklist. "That you participated." I didn't respond. I just tilted my head, the way people do when they're trying to decide if they're being manipulated. She didn't wait for more, just nodded and walked off. That night, I lay in bed longer than usual before falling asleep. Not because I was anxious, but because I wasn't. For once, I wasn't running scenarios in my head, planning my next move, calculating how to stay in good graces with people who didn't value mine. For the first time in a long time, I had drawn a line, and no one had crossed it. That changed something in me. I stopped volunteering for things that weren't in my job description. stopped answering emails after hours, stopped jumping up to refill the printer paper just to be seen as helpful. I still did my work, and did it well, but I stopped bleeding myself dry to look good doing it. At first, it felt unnatural, like shedding a second skin. But day by day, I started breathing easier. And it wasn't just me. Carla began taking her full lunch break. Marcus left on time instead of staying late to fix problems others caused. And someone, I still don't know who, put a sticky note above the shared microwave that read, "Respect goes both ways. Simple. Anonymous, brave, no one took it down." It started with a missed email. I'd seen it, just hadn't replied. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't mine. It had been sent at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday, long after I'd clocked out, asking if I could help double-check a shipment discrepancy from another department. A month ago, I would have jumped to answer. I would have stayed up half the night triple-checking spreadsheets that weren't mine, just to earn a line of praise in some manager's update. But this time, I didn't. I turned off my phone, heated my dinner, and watched an old episode of Jeopardy! Instead, by morning, the issue had already been solved by the person who was actually responsible for it. That was the first ripple. The second came later that week, when the manager sent out a company-wide email asking for volunteers to help plan the Spring Refresh, an internal event filled with awkward team-building exercises, cold sandwiches, and empty compliments. Only 2 people replied. Neither of them was me. Neither of them was Carla. Neither of them was Marcus. I don't know if I had started a movement, but I had definitely started something. People were quieter in the mornings, more direct in their emails, less performative in meetings. It wasn't rebellion, it was refusal. Refusal to dance harder just to stay in the same place, and not everyone liked it. One Tuesday afternoon, my manager called me into her office. The air was overly air-conditioned. The blinds tilted to block out light, but not suspicion. She gestured to a seat with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've noticed a shift in your engagement lately," she began, lacing her fingers like she was threading a needle of concern. I stayed quiet. "You're still doing great work," she added quickly. "No one's questioning your performance, but I've gotten the sense that maybe your energy has changed." That was her word for it. Energy. I wanted to ask if she meant obedience, but I didn't. Instead, I replied calmly, "I've just been focusing on my actual responsibilities." She tilted her head, clearly trying to read between the lines. "Of course. It's just that people notice when someone starts pulling back. It can shift the dynamic, create a tone." I nodded. "That may be true." Silence. I didn't fill it. I let it sit there, heavy and unmovable. Eventually, she smiled again, more like a reflex than a choice. "Well, I appreciate the clarity." As I stood to leave, she added, "You know, Mr. Landon really appreciated your presence at his birthday lunch." I paused at the doorway. "I'm sure he did," I said, "but I wasn't there for him." She didn't respond. I didn't wait. The next day, Carla left a post-it on my desk. "Thanks for making room for the rest of us." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't public. But it meant something. Every office has a current running beneath the surface. A current of fear, exhaustion, unspoken rules. And when someone swims against it, even quietly, the water remembers. So does the system. Within a week, new notices went up. Policies about volunteer roles being optional but appreciated. A memo about respecting personal time and boundaries. HR wanted to boost morale after recent feedback. They didn't mention names. They never do. But I saw the tremor behind the glass. The way power recoils when people stop giving it oxygen. That Friday, the same manager who had summoned me days earlier walked by my desk as I was finishing up. She hesitated, then said, "Heading out on time?" I looked at the clock, 5:00 p.m., sharp. "Yes," I replied. "It's been a full day." She smiled, just slightly. "Well deserved." This time, I believed her. It didn't happen all at once. The change was slow, like the way water erodes stone. Invisible at first. but undeniable once you noticed. It began with a calendar invite. Optional, team engagement roundtable, feedback welcome. Optional, that word was new. Then came a survey from HR. Anonymous, they promised, filled with questions they'd never dared to ask before. Do you feel valued by leadership? Have you ever felt pressured to participate in non-work activities? Do you feel safe saying no? Safe? It was almost laughable. But people filled it out, quietly, cautiously, and somehow, you could feel the building exhale. Within days, Carla was moved from the front-facing payroll desk to a quieter spot near the window to support focus and reduce distractions. She didn't say anything, but she brought in a small plant and a framed photo of her daughters. It was the first time I'd seen her decorate her space in 3 years. Marcus began leaving sticky notes for the IT interns, encouraging helpful ones. He started mentoring again, something he'd stopped doing after his last project was credited to someone else. And I started breathing easier. Not because things were fixed, but because I wasn't bracing myself every second for a battle I didn't choose. The system hadn't collapsed, it had flinched. That was enough, for now. But not everyone appreciated the tremor. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation near the copier, 2 mid-level managers whispering, "She's gotten bold lately." "You mean entitled?" "She used to be helpful. She used to be afraid." That last sentence wasn't said, but it hung there. I could feel it. I didn't confront them, didn't slam a drawer or shoot a glance. I simply walked by, placed my report on the printer tray, and nodded once as I passed. Let them talk. Let them guess what changed. Because here's the truth. I hadn't become bold. I had just stopped apologizing for existing. And in a place like this, that alone is seen as rebellion. The next week, a department-wide email arrived from Mr. Landon himself. "We are proud of our culture of mutual respect and professionalism. We encourage all team members to speak up, step up, and be part of shaping our future." I read it twice. It was polished, vague, and sterile, like all his messages. But buried inside was something that felt almost unsettled, like he'd realized the ground beneath him had shifted just enough to make him question his footing. I wondered if he remembered my name now. I doubted it, but I no longer needed him to, because the people who mattered remembered what I didn't say, what I didn't give, what I didn't allow. That kind of memory can't be bought or erased. And now, even the walls were listening. I still remember the texture of the cake. Soft, sweet, balanced. But not mine. Not really. Somewhere in the haze of that afternoon, with voices rising and paper plates rustling, I'd taken a bite I hadn't paid for and claimed something far more valuable than dessert. It wasn't about money. It never was. It was about dignity. Mine. Weeks passed. The office returned to its rhythm, polished and predictable. But under it all, something had shifted. Something too quiet for HR to track, too personal for memos. People looked at me differently now, not with admiration, not with fear, but with a kind of thoughtful pause. Like they were trying to decode a language they hadn't heard in a long time. A language that said, "You don't have to keep saying yes just to survive." That language had no volume, just boundaries. I never made a speech, never raised my voice, but somehow I had spoken. And somehow people had listened. I don't pretend I changed the world. I didn't walk out with a lawsuit or a dramatic resignation. I still show up, I still do my job, but I do it on my terms now, and that might be the most radical thing I've ever done. The plant on Carla's desk is still alive. Marcus got a raise. The sticky note above the microwave is now laminated. HR called it an uplifting piece of team culture. The irony doesn't escape me. As for me, I haven't been invited to any more birthday lunches, but I haven't been left out either. Some days I eat my lunch outside. No small talk, no fake laughs. Just me, the sky, and a little silence I carved out with nothing but stillness. And honestly, it tastes better than cake. Sometimes the smallest act of defiance isn't loud. It's a quiet refusal, a straight spine, a bite of cake you didn't pay for, because you already paid enough just by being there.